Hey, Janice. Hello, how's it going? All right. Sure.
So you want the other?
Almost back to. Good to meet you. It's been 4 years since I've done nursing, but every once in a while I
So, there's no participant, so whenever you're ready, I can.
Okay.
I'll have the recording, I just don't know for live streaming if it says. So.
Call the meeting to order.
Sorry.
Call the meeting to order. It is 7:01 p.m. August 8th, 2023, here New Paltz Police Commission meeting. Let's move forward to the agenda. Everyone received today's agenda. Have a motion to approve the agenda.
I approve the agenda.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Next, we'll move on to approval of the minutes from its February and July's minutes. Everyone received a copy? Review it?
I approve those minutes.
Your motion? Anyone have a second?
There was an election, I think.
There were, yes, Keely did our minutes for February. We did not have a secretary then. And then July's minutes.
Was there an additional question? It was something,
You believe there's a correction on the February minutes?
May, wasn't it?
Oh, that was Tom's last name.
Oh.
Yeah, I think I edited that for, yeah,
Yes, she did send us an updated,
thank you.
with the correct last name.
I missed it.
Aside from that, was there? We're approving the minutes for February and July?
I wasn't here.
Okay, that's right. 1 second.
I second.
Okay. Anyone look forward to announcements? Does anyone have announcements for today?
So a couple of announcements, our August conversation with the police is going to be Wednesday, August 16th at 6 p.m. at the Memorial in the Park. Small down there. Again, it's Wednesday, August 16th, 6 p.m. Memorial. And also, so everyone knows the New Paltz Opioid Overdose Prevention and Response Team has resumed tabling, free Narcan training and tabling at the New Paltz Farmers Market every Sunday from 10 to 1. Somebody from the team will be at the Farmers Market offering free Narcan kits, free Narcan training, as well as other substance abuse prevention resources and literature. And if you can't make that, you can always go to the New Paltz Opioid Overdose Response Team website. There are wealth of information and resources that are available there as well.
I have a question, Chief.
Yeah.
For the new upcoming school year, did the police department do anything in regards to what's welcoming students back or anything similar to that?
We have it in the past, it's something I can certainly talk to Superintendent Guado if it's something that they want to do. The big thing, we're always doing in preparation is making sure that we put out the signs for the school bus, awareness that buses are out, people should, take a little bit of extra time if they gotta get someplace so that they avoid having to rush, and they're passing stop school buses on the roadways. We make sure that we get our patrols out following school buses, just to make sure that's, there's an awareness campaign with that. And we'll resume our regular foot patrols in the schools themselves. But just to prevent virus, that's something that's absolutely.
Point of clarification. You said you do foot patrols in the school?
Yes.
How often is that?
Daily, so officers take, your football, just walk around, saying hello to students, teachers, there's no set times, randomly throughout the day, and at each of the schools.
Is it the same officer?
Primarily it's our day four officers, and even, our 3 to 11 officers. If there's an event, there's a sporting event, there's an art, event, or musical, officers. So, wow, this is enjoy, and, so, doing more of that even on the 3 to 11 shift and that is taking place in the schools. And, we have participated, we did trick or treat, trunk or treat, so, we still do those as well.
Any other announcements?
Nope, that's not.
Okay. We'll move on to the public input. Would anyone like to say anything at this portion? And I don't believe we received anything. Right, so we'll move forward with the discussion regarding the recommendations of Reform and Reinvention Committee. And this month's topics will be the chokehold policy and karate, thank you, restraints, and the crime misuse of force incidents. Chief, in any particular order, you like to?
Whatever you guys would like to discuss first.
Does anyone have any particular questions regarding the difference in the policy? What would you say the biggest amendment to the policy, I wouldn't say the original policy, but the policy before the amendment to?
So, I mean, this was, this recommendation is where, I was in some disagreement with members of the Reform and Reinvention Committee. We have never had a chokehold policy. We've never trained chokeholds, we've never authorized chokeholds. And our policy, the policy that was in place prior to the Reform and Reinvention Committee was actually in compliance with the New York State Department of Criminal Justice Services model policy. Where it said there, in terms of the use of the chokehold, and I'll read it verbatim, is that use of deadly physical force, subsection related to chokeholds and obstruction of breathing or circulation or blood circulation. Any application of pressure to the throat, windpipe, neck, or blocking of the mouth or nose of a person in a manner that may hinder breathing, reduce intake of air, or obstruct blood circulation is prohibited unless deadly physical force is authorized. And so that is from the model policy, that's what our policy reflected at that time. Members of the committee did not want that in there, so we removed it. The only time that the word chokehold is mentioned in our current policy is in terms of the definition, as well as I think there's three spots in that policy. But nothing that authorizes use. The disagreement that I had with the committee at the time was that the state of New York is saying our policy is in compliance with the model policy that was issued from the state of New York. I understand that, the concerns that they had, and so we made those arrangements. We've never taught it, it's never been part of our training curriculum, it's never been with the agency for 30 years. So.
That's
I think I gave you both, policies, the policy that was in place, as well as the model policy, policy that was in place as well as the revision. And I think, let's pull this up here. policy that has an amendment of September 25th, 2020.
Is that the non-deadly force restraint?
Yeah, so that would be on page, I think it was on page 8 of that. And that language in there, we got that from directly from the model policy at the time. And as I said, we removed that, but, there was still some concern about the fact that the word chokehold appeared in the policy. And I feel like it has to. If we're gonna prohibit something, we have to make sure that we define it and that our officers know that it's not something that they're allowed to do.
Chief, in the last 5 years, has there been any complaints from citizens about the use of the chokehold or similar?
Yeah, it's nothing, we don't use it, we don't employ it, we don't teach it, we don't condone it. The idea that behind the model
That
policy.
doesn't mean there wouldn't be a complaint.
Well, we have not received a complaint.
That's what it
So, and just to go back, so one of the issues at hand, one of the concerns is that when we look at the previous policy and the policy from the state was that you're talking about a situation with deadly physical force. So in this particular case, under our current policy, an officer in a deadly physical force situation would be, it'd be permissible for them to use their firearm or any other deadly physical force, but not a chokehold. So just that's what the way our current policy reads, and that's not how it read prior to that.
You do have an NPPR, so never heard of that.
Do you all have a copy of the,
We do.
of the,
2016.
no, not of the report, but of
Yes.
the police?
Commissioner report?
No, what the chief, what were you just reading
I
from?
was reading from 2 different policies. They have
So
policies.
do you have a copy of the policy?
Yeah.
Have you reviewed it to see if it's there?
It is in the policy as
She's
stated.
asking if the current policy of ours, the 2020 New Paltz policy.
No,
if
well,
what he's saying was.
2022, the amendment.
So
It
the,
was in 2020.
The next one.
There's another,
There's another.
Oh, the other, okay.
This was stated September 2020.
so the current policy that's in place for the police department, have you all read it? To see what's in it and what's not in it?
Yes.
Right.
Okay, so what do you see in terms of chokehold?
Chokeholds, any chokeholds with or without a device that restricts a person's airway or any intentional application of pressure to the throat, windpipe, neck, or intentional blocking of the mouth or nose of the person in a manner that may hinder breathing, reduce intake of air, or obstruct blood circulation is prohibited.
Okay, so what does a chokehold do?
That's
Of
all.
those things.
Yeah.
And there's
So it's
those
prohibited.
It's
Right.
Okay, so
prohibited.
it's prohibited.
Oh, so you use those words prohibited in there?
That's what the policy says.
It's just weird because the policy is, I would think things that you pretty much do.
Not always.
But I'm just saying how I perceive it to be. Yeah, I do recall we did not even want that in there because then that could, in the midst of stuff, someone could think, well, it was there to use it, but, the other commission, so.
The state itself, the law, is written in that manner. So they're
Yeah, but police departments don't have to. do
They're
what the
not.
state says.
going against what's required, which is for them to be notified that they are not supposed to use chokeholds.
Well, I understand why some may read it and say, well, there shouldn't even be a discussion about it, it should go without saying it's not prohibited. But I think it's important that the new officers, or if anyone is reading that, understand that there is, the policy actually is, it's not a gray area for this department, it is prohibited, it should be used, so I understand why it's written and invented that way, where it's still mentioned, but it's not, very clearly that this department doesn't.
So what's there described as chokehold? So why could it just not be chokeholds or not to be used with all the other stuff that is in there?
That covers, it totally covers what a chokehold would do.
Because my interpretation of what a chokehold would be, may not be the same as what you feel the chokehold is.
No, but it has to be, it's not what I think it is, it's whatever is.
I'm talking about as an officer,
Mhm.
if you say no chokeholds, for me, what a chokehold is, what is a chokehold for me?
You tell me, if it's not that, what is a chokehold for you? What would be a chokehold for you?
So if I could, the definition here for chokehold.
No, that's what I'm saying.
New York State law.
Right, that's what I was
Directly from the
explaining.
What is in the policy.
Yeah.
Right. And I just wanted to say that, you know, from having been a nurse, right, we have a policy to prevent infections, and then we have a procedure about how to prevent those infections, right? So I think sometimes policies can state the best of what we want, and being very clear is what I see this policy as, that any of the stuff above that is totally prohibited, and it's very clear that it's prohibited, you know, and it's not a procedural issue, it's the policy in terms of the statement. And that's, when I read this, that's how I saw it. You know, through the lens of my nursing, in that here's a policy and then we have a procedure. And the procedure is what, you know, the officers do in their training, and policy is what the expectations are of those officers. And that's how I read it.
Chief, how did it read before you made any changes? How did the policy read?
What I said earlier is that our prior policy, when we began, when you guys began your work, our policy was that a chokehold is prohibited unless deadly physical force is warranted. And that's when we had lengthy discussions about this in terms of that, you know, so I remember saying, so an officer can shoot somebody, justified in shooting somebody, but not using chokehold, or potentially an officer could be put in a position where they're not able to get to their gun or any of their tools, and not be allowed or be authorized in using chokehold and be seriously injured or killed as a result of that prohibition. And our prior policy, prior iterations policy, was exactly word for word as the model policy for the state of New York, which was issued in fall of 2020.
Yes.
So we removed that and
Anyone else?
No.
Any further questions on that topic? Okay. Moving on to decrying misuse of force incidents. Questions for the chief in regards to that? Recommendation? Okay.
in terms of that particular recommendation, you know, I think it's something that we are doing. Really, we responded publicly with words for the murder. We responded publicly with murder. Consulted and had a listening session. So I think that, you know, it's something that we're aware of. You know, I'm thankful, not just because she's here, but you were one of my first phone calls, remember?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so, you know, I think it's important. Not something, you know, but I also look at, for me, it's also something I, you know, I look at on a case by case basis as to, you know, what we're doing and the setting. And there are times we may not necessarily, may not be a public statement. There are things that we're gonna take bits and pieces from other incidents, things that happen outside of our jurisdiction, and how can we best learn from that? So we've used instances of, for example, the death of Daniel Cruz in Rochester. We looked at that and the circumstances involved in that. We made sure that we included training to avoid having that happen. What can we do to mitigate the risk of that happening? Same thing, there was an incident, a 9-year-old girl who was pepper sprayed. We worked with our defensive tactics instructors, our CMT instructor. We put in an in-service plan training for all of our personnel. So it's, for me, yes, it's important to speak out and speak about those things, but I also think it's vitally important to say, hey, what happened here? And how can we mitigate that, the chances of that happening here? And because we're not perfect. And, you know, that was, I think, saying that what favors are prepared, so, you know, I'd like to be prepared but I'm not gonna say to you here that we're always gonna be right. And so, you know, we wanna take these things and we wanna learn from them. And yes, we want to speak out against them, and we wanna hear what the public has to say. So it's why we continue our conversations with the police on a monthly basis. We certainly don't get the turnout, you know, when there's not something that happens, precipitates or precedes these conversations with the police, but I think it's important. And I really was thankful that a lot of people came out when we had you informed the police department. So that was great. It's important to hear and give people voice across the year. That's how we hear what the community feels and thinks.
All right, did you state your name when you
No, probably not, Diana, I'm
please
sorry.
state your name for. I'm sorry.
Diana, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I'm sorry about that.
No, that's okay.
But I don't know if there's any questions, and for me, I think, some of it is developing relationships with people so that we understand and how we best can respond.
Is it ever appropriate to write a letter to the editor after an incident with you? In terms of a public statement besides just these forms, would that ever be something that you would consider as a way of addressing this?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not opposed, and I think on a case-to-case, and I received a message, on Facebook, on my Facebook page, both those instances, and spoke my feelings, and I have no problem with it. I have to be, get an understanding of what the circumstances are. I have no problem with that. And I have no problem. Yes, do I think that will go to this profession the wrong way, and I consider it bleeding heart amongst the people in the county as far as law enforcement executive is concerned, yeah, I don't necessarily care. So, again, it's something we're going to continue to do, and I don't mind, I'm relying on you to do. The things that we're missing. That's why we like that conversation with police, because everybody has to do different process.
I was just gonna say, when you said letter to the editor, I'm like, I think most people know that their letter to the editor is their social media screens of their departments, Twitter account or Facebook. Or
Well, I just think sometimes the letter to the editor is just a different population than who's on Facebook or who's on social media, and sometimes, and I don't know if it's prohibited in your, role, but it's, I see Neil, I see other people writing letters to the editor, zoning board, planning board, in support of X, Y, Z, and I just thought it might be another avenue or another vehicle for decrying the misuse once you felt that you could put your name to it as the chief of New Paltz Police Department. So it was just something I had thought of.
Absolutely.
What else? Okay, moving on next, Chief, are you ready to move forward with the monthly report?
I am. So, in terms of this month's report, there are 2 commendations. There's 1 complaint against personnel that we will review. There's one incident involving the Office of Defensive Action. As I noted here in the report, this was filed at the end of the month, so the review is still underway. The report and the investigative findings will be included in the August monthly report and will be viewed publicly at our September police commission meeting. In terms of change of personnel, Kaylee Marka was sworn in, and she has begun, she's doing a field training. Excited about that. And, looking forward to her, hopefully in the next few weeks, being ready to go out on dispatch. So, in terms of the detective's report, just one case to highlight that we responded to, Bill Cuddy's report of an advantage firearm inside the establishment. Officers now have left that establishment, detectives initiated an investigation. That person was identified. Subsequently learned that the individual was guns, airsoft BB guns. This individual had to charge, and our detectives now are in the process of filing an extreme risk protection order as well. Just given the circumstances, we are filing that order. And so it will be filed in Dutchess County. Just so you're also aware, one of the things we're learning about the extreme risk protection orders. These orders must be filed in the county of residence of the individual. So, for example, something happens here and that person lives in Erie County, we have to file that in Erie County. So that means all that entire matter is adjudicated outside of Ulster County. And
What did I say?
if they're out of state, I believe you can file them in the county, but I'm not positive. But if they are, for example, we had this situation, you have a student, and we have to file another, but we have to file that extreme risk protection order in their full-time residences. And so, that can be problematic, it certainly can be costly as well, but just something to make sure you guys are aware of. In this particular case, it's a person in Dutchess County, so it's not too problematic, but as I said, somebody lives in Erie County, that can make it a little bit less. So,
Do you have, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I was gonna ask, do you find when you have to file in other counties that you're having difficulty with getting them to be receptive to make sure that it's filed and dealt with appropriately? Or?
This is our first one out of Ulster County, so the process plays out. Well, we contract out with a private attorney. Is kind of going to specialize in this. He's full-time job in the county attorney's office. But based upon his experiences with that, and the town tailor agreement with him, so that he would represent the police department when we have these hearings. It's important. There are legal arguments that we want to make sure that we're presenting our best put our best foot forward and making sure that we're doing everything we can to secure the order. And so there's a cost associated with that, obviously, but we think it's important.
Yeah, my question was too, you mentioned that the firearm was recovered. Is it something that someone needs a permit in order to have on their person?
No, it's an airsoft.
Okay, and then what happens when something is retrieved like that? Are you guys holding on to it? Okay. And is there at any point that person can get it back, or a family member can get it back, even though that person is charged with menacing?
I don't want to give an answer. I
Okay,
don't
no.
know specifics. It's something I would want you to confer with the DA's office, but only because this isn't it's not a real firearm, so I don't know what that would be, and that's something we would talk to the DA's office about as well.
Yeah, that's kind of what jumped out at me about this.
So there's a process that we have in place whenever we're returning a firearm that includes a mental health check, that includes, checking the district attorney's office as well. So there is a process in place before we return any firearm to them.
I was just surprised that BB gun was, in the same classification in terms of that as a firearm, so that's part of my.
But this was for an evidentiary purpose. The person was charged with criminal violation. So this is evidence in that, and so that's what happens through
And an airsoft is a handgun, right?
Yes, it's a BB gun. In this case, it was a replica of a hand.
That was my,
That was one case of detective report. Two accommodations. The first is for Officer Jeremiah Childs. This is an email letter thanking, it was actually an email sent directly to me, just thanking Jeremiah for his professionalism, courtesy, and thoroughness. Prior evening, this individual was involved in a motor vehicle accident. Officer Childs responded, just assured that individual and was able to provide them details and information, and just wanted to thank them and knowing here that their pleasant professional approach in an upsetting situation. So I did share this with Jeremiah and made sure that it was included in this month's report. And this next commendation is for Officer John Miller. He took a lost property complaint from an individual who was visiting, and in this case, the person just wanted to thank John for his follow-up in particular. Gentlemen came in, made a report, and just the fact that the officer took the time to follow up and confirm some information and check in with them, he thought it was very, very nice, and just thank you for that. If you have any questions about any of those. In terms of our monthly training report, just the one to highlight obviously is the fact that Officers Rosales and Cabrera have begun their field training. They did so on July 25th. They graduated phase 2 of the police academy on July 20th. They did an in-service training with Detective Judge on July 23rd. And they began their field training on July 25th. Hoping that it's going well, they're doing great, and hoping that they are on, continue to stay on pace so that they'll be ready to go on their own by November 1st. And just make you all aware, I mean, there's a lot of time, there's a lot of work that goes into preparing an officer to be ready to go out on their own. So in this particular case, from the time that Officers Cabrera and Rosales were officially hired to the point that they're going to be on their own, we're talking almost 5 months. If we had sent somebody to the police academy, we're talking 12 to 15 months. So there's a huge investment, and while this is going on, we're still with 3 bodies down. So we're definitely excited to have them on board. We're very excited to have them operational. Because at that point, they're only be down 1 body. So it's important. It helps with the other officers in terms of minimizing that whole kind of after work shift coverage, things like that. So.
and before the end of the year, are you anticipating any other retirements?
No, not that I've heard, and I mean, retirements, no, because no one else is eligible to retire at this point. But I don't know anybody who's looking to transfer out to any other PDs. So at this point, when I say we're down 3 bodies, it just means that I consider 3 because Rosales and Cabrera are not operational. So there are 3 holes in the schedule. They don't count towards shift coverage in any way, shape, or form. Hopefully, November 1st it will, and then we'll be down 1 body. Certainly, hoping maybe to do some interviews next month. Respective candidates, the police officer. So speak to you more about that and get some things worked out with that. And that's really all I had in the monthly report unless you had any questions regarding anything else in the report.
I want to make a comment that should make it roll. I did my ride along with A-Line last Friday, and I was very impressed with everything. All the people, the way they handled it, there was fights stirring outside P&Gs, and they were just around, and when it broke, I mean, it was like the cavalry came in and just went in, took care of it. And the way they handled the people that they took into custody was very professional. And I watched part of the interview with me at the station, and again, it's very professional. It's just a really nice job. And when I asked Sergeant Redmond about the experience, since the A-line is the 11th to 7th, it's not the one everybody wants. So that's where you have your least experienced officers. And as a teacher, when I started in New York City, took a job, they gave me all the worst classes. It's not the smart thing to do, because the new teacher doesn't know what the hell they're doing. I don't think it's smart for having the A-line with the least experience, but because of union rules, I don't know what can be done.
Right now, the tours are bid, it's part of the collective bargaining agreement. I think maybe something that we discussed at, the upcoming negotiations, certainly a concern. But in terms of experience, our concerns are all of our shifts.
Yeah, but I mean, I think, when I asked Sergeant Redmond, I think if you average it out, it was like maybe 2 years of experience with an average group that was out there.
They're the youngest, but just so you, in terms of department-wide right now, so we're down 3. I have 1 patrol officer who has 7 years on. I have 1 patrol officer who may have 3.5. The remainder of those officers have anywhere from 2 years, 2.5 years to. So we are, I mean, 75% of our agency has less than 4 years experience of our patrol complement. So we are leaning into our sergeants. It's one of the reasons we have made a concerted effort to reduce some of the administrative duties of the sergeants. We have tasked Officer Gasparini. She comes in and does some of those administrative duties. Part-time Officer Cheryl Benjamin, who comes in and handles some of that as well. Lieutenant and I have taken on more of that because we need our supervisors out. We need them available to answer calls with the officers, to be there to guide them. Mentoring is huge. There is if you look at our agency, you start from the top, and then you're talking for me, 30 years, and 10, 28, and then we go down to 14, and so there's a gap, and then from there, it's even more of a gap. That's the problem with turnover. Hoping that, we'll retain what we have, the members that we have there. I think that's gotta be something that we prioritize in collective bargaining, upcoming collective bargaining negotiations. Because that is a concern. It is a concern.
Well, historically in teaching, we lose teachers within the first 5 years because they get burned out. Do you think that happens in the police department also?
No, I think what we're losing, and when I say we, not just the falls, but in this county, we are losing people to other counties for pay. Money is a big factor. So the state of New York, they changed the retirement system. Cuomo, under his administration, they created, I think, in terms of the police fire retirement, they're now tier 6, I'm tier 2. As a tier 2 individual, most of my overtime that I would work in my count towards my retirement. It goes towards my final average salary, it goes towards my retirement. For these kids, none of it. So we're running into a twofold problem. You have people who say, why do I want to work at that money? Yes, that money gives me the money right now, but it means nothing towards my retirement. So I may make, even if you have a hard charger, the officer who says, okay, well, I'm going to make $50,000 overtime. That's great. But none of that's going to count towards your retirement. So they're going down to Westchester, to Rockland, to Putnam, because the base salary is there. We can't actually, and we never will. But my issue is more with the state retirement system. It is hurting our ability to take it.
I know in New York City, there were major abuses of that system because somebody was getting ready to retire, they got you got all the overtime that you get, so the people that were working as sergeants and retired at have to pay. So that's the other side.
Well, I'm not saying it should be stick it all the way on or stick it all, you know, to me, it's, I'm not an either or, you know, I think that you're asking me why we're losing people. Because a base, a six-figure base salary is going to be any salary we have plus overtime. It's not, you know, we had option for the broken on us, they're talking about making $140,000. You know, I mean, we're not competing with that. Even, you know, even old. And so, you know, the other part of it is people want a better work-life balance. You know, when I was young, I didn't really care about the work-life balance so much, you know. I worked as much overtime as I could and that was that, but, you know, as you get older, I would say my priority, it's changed. Some of these young people, that's a different, you know, priority. But, you know, that's where we're losing. I mean, we lost Amanda Schneider, earlier this year to the town of Gibson because their base salary is $15,000 more than she was making.
Thanks.
Excuse me. I need to move into executive session.
Second that?
It is now 7:41.
You all are aware, we're still recording and I'm gonna leave here, but it's recording. I know, so that's why I'm telling you, I'm muted, but.
What?
We'll say
You're unmuted.
All set, Jane?
Yes, you're unmuted, you're good to go.
I make the motion to come back out of the executive session tomorrow.
Is that for that?
Alright, it is now, I think, 8:19. Does anyone have any final comments, questions before we adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Anyone second? Second, okay, we adjourned at 8:20.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The document. That was a lot, that was, yeah. That was the last one.
Yeah. I think so, isn't it, Shelley, you want to start?
Yeah, happy to be there.
Yeah.